Whew. T1's not here to knock us out, and BLG's the first seed. It's like 2024. We're back, boys. All right, let's take this. Boom. We can rip this little patch off. Where's my... There we go. Let's just put this on. All right. Well, hey guys, it's Alk. I'm an LPL English unofficial broadcast commentator on the show. And for BLG this year, I think if you've seen BLG in the past, you can kind of get a really good read as to what this team's going to do this year. So far, I think they've had the most interesting playstyle reads in 2016. Their playstyle really just leans on their mechanical strength of the lanes. You have Bin, Knight, and Viper and on. Shun's going to use early bot priority thanks to the 2v2s that they draft, and this is, yes, real priority, and he's going to use that to try to invade the enemy jungle, try to gain advantages, whether that's ganking the bottom lane on the 3rd and 4th wave, or just purely gathering information on the enemy jungle camps. An issue that we have seen from them in their playoffs is while their dragon setups aren't the greatest, a lot of the time they're going to be spending that just standing in front of the objective, trying to bait the enemy team through either fog of war or flank plays to then put themselves in a good spot around the dragon. That could be an issue against some of the better teams at first stand, and that'll be something that myself and hopefully the rest of the world will be able to see. Maybe BLG will work on that with the time in between now and the start of the tournament. Talking about individual players, On has had probably the most impeccable season from start to finish, but Bin really the most improved on this team. He goes from almost leaving mid-split and even having a really terrible start to not just this year, but if we're being honest, 2025 was not this guy's year. He has now looked like he's potentially going to try to reclaim the best in his role, the best top laner in the world, and he has everything on his side to do it. I think the team is ready to do this. On as well seems like he's really enjoying the amount of gold that is going back into support and loves to abuse these matchups where he can kind of just roam around and basically use himself as bait for the enemy team. He really reminds me of a player like Mickey X from the LEC, who will just be in spots where if he's there, he's getting vision, and as long as he's not getting caught, it's a great boon for his team. So I want to say thank you to Poro for having me on, and for first stand for the rest of the year, it's always going to be LPL Jayo.
Thanks for the intro assist, Alk Battery. I still have the mouth sore by the way, so the voiceover might not be as clean this time. Poro here with the 7th team breakdown, this time for BLG from the LPL. The more things change, the more they stay the same, I guess. For those unaware, BLG has been, for over 3 years now, a perennial top-tier LPL team who frequently qualifies to international tournaments. However, this split really felt like the split where we might get an interesting new winner from the LPL actually. For all of regular season, nobody really knew what was going down in the LPL. BLG came out guns blazing at first with a triumphant series win over AL, but then they fell into a bit of a slump as they lost 3 matches in a row after that. JDG had BLG's number, but they couldn't beat Weibo, who in turn couldn't beat BLG. By the end of the split, we had nothing figured out as there were still 4 teams, all of which had numerous strengths and weaknesses, who were all primed to try and claim the title. Once we got to playoffs though, it was all business as usual for BLG as they easily stomped their way through the competition straight to grand finals. I know one of those series went to 5 games, but it still felt like a stomp, trust me. For some of you, seeing BLG at the top actually might create some doubt. While BLG was super strong in 2024, it felt like their 2025 year was a step back as they had numerous forced roster changes that culminated in one of the most disappointing international showings ever from a top-tier Eastern team. With a core player from their 2023 and 2024 years back though, plus the LPL return of world champion Viper, this BLG, while still riddled with many potential issues, feels way more in tune with that iconic aggressive style that they made their name out of in the past. If you enjoyed watching BLG before, get ready for a lot of that same flair that existed prior. In the top lane is Bin, who has now been a part of BLG since 2022. He's one of the all-time great top laners and probably the best to ever come out of China. For most of his career, Bin has excelled most at high damage carry champions, most notably Jax, although he's also been a master of Gangplank, Camille, Kennen, and many more over the years. Anytime he shows up to an international, his goal is to smash the skulls of his opponents through overwhelming mechanics and bravery. In 2025, Bin actually had one of his worst years. His performance was pretty inconsistent on his own, even going so far as to miss out on all pro honors in Split 3, but the main issue was that the team was going through a bit of an identity crisis with the departure of their jungler Shun. Bin's carries had to be put on hold for a while as the team tried to figure out which lane they actually wanted to play through, and because of that, the year was pretty underwhelming for him overall. This year though, it feels like Bin is back. He still makes a lot of really stupid mistakes every now and then, but that's something he's always done even in his best years, and he feels way more like himself in-game than he did before. BLG is willing to give him way more flexibility in champion select, and he's been ramping up pretty hard in playoffs, culminating in an extremely dominant thrashing of JDG's top laner Xiaozhu in Grand Finals. Don't underestimate Bin, he's still one of the best top laners in the world, and he's going to be hungry to prove it after what happened at his last couple internationals. With the team looking way more like how they did in their best splits, I have to attribute a lot of it to the return of their ex-jungler Shun. I'm still not 100% sure why BLG wanted to play jungler hot potato and cycle through 4 different players in less than a year, but what I do know is that Shun definitely got the short end of the stick, and the fact that his spot ended up being occupied by the likes of Shadow and Beichuan really describes how many internal struggles the team had perfectly. During that down year, you all may not have been familiar with what he was doing as he missed out on all 3 internationals, but don't let that fool you. Shun had some down stretches on JDG for sure, but there were other stretches where he was a top tier jungler in the entire world, maybe even fighting for being the best. I thought Shun was number 1 in split 1 of last year and ended the year settled somewhere around the 6 to 8 range. Everything you remember from his BLG days remained mostly intact in 2025, and it's back for 2026. He's one of the more proactive junglers out there, always hunting down plays and trying to bury enemy teams as soon as possible. He loves overloads, repeat ganks, invades, bush camping, anything he can do to push the pace of the game forward. I think his exact style is the primary reason why BLG are back to being the type of team that they are, because Shun is good enough at maintaining the stability of all of his lanes that anyone on the team can pick whatever they want and win with it. BLG also still retains Mr. Pick Whatever You Want himself, Knight. In a world of fearless draft, Knight remains on top, and he's logged 14 unique picks this split alone. What makes Knight scariest though isn't the sheer size of his champion pool, but the fact that he's hyper elite with pretty much all of it. With the exception of Azir, I would trust Knight to pick up any of those other 13 and hard carry a game with it if he's put in the right position. With that in mind, this has happened in many of BLG's games this year. If you put Knight in a position to carry, he's going to take over the entire game with a ridiculous scoreline and damage output. When it comes to the most dominant wins we saw in LPL all split, almost all of the games I would point to would very specifically be BLG wins where Knight was the focus of the draft. He remains the best LPL mid laner by a comfortable margin, and if you're hoping for an LPL international win, this is the player you're going to want on your team to do it. Aside from bringing back Shun, the massive offseason change BLG made was finally parting ways with their longtime AD carry Elk to bring in Viper from the LCK. The offseason surrounding this move was crazy. Viper's destination was probably the biggest move of the entire year, and he was making it as dramatic as possible. All we knew for a while was that he said he would go to the LPL if he could play with a certain player, rumors say Knight, and this sparked a mass bidding war between all of the top teams to try to get the right roster configuration to get Viper to come over. All of this while the LCK teams also prepared their rosters in case the LPL delayed too long and Viper stayed in Korea, and basically the entire offseason in the East was stalled out for one guy alone. It's completely justified too, as Viper spent all of 2025 as anywhere from the 1st to 3rd best ADC in the world, and won Worlds on EDG the last time he went to China. Viper is probably the most consistent top tier AD carry out there, and he's almost always going to get you really good value out of whatever style you want him to play. When Viper decided on BLG, it seemed like the region was locked down. BLG have a super team to end all super teams, they'll win LPL and be the one team who can maybe contest Gen G for international titles. With a quick glimpse of the results, it seems like that may still be true. However, the transition into BLG was not actually that smooth for Viper, and it took a while for him to be properly acclimated into the vibe of the team. Even now, after winning LPL dominantly, I still can't say for sure that BLG have quite figured out how they want to play with Viper, and I'm wondering if this will become one of their weaknesses at first stand. Either way though, Viper is still a world-class player, and he's good enough to stomp anyone regardless. Finally, there's On, and as Alk alluded to earlier, it's been a pretty nice year for him so far. Believe it or not, On has yet to log a single game with double-digit deaths this year, and he's not solo inting all of their losses. In 2023 and 2024, On was an extremely good support, and oftentimes found himself in top 2 or top 3 conversations in his role, but in 2025, things were ugly, especially at MSI and Worlds. He was really bad at both, and was a big contributor to BLG's Swiss stage exit when they faced embarrassing losses to a number of Western teams. All of this means that I'm going to be very careful about praising On when it comes to this tournament. His internationals were stinkers, and I don't know if I trust him quite yet, especially because I still see some of the int come out in him sometimes. In playoffs, he had multiple moments where he was caught out on a stupid timer, or engaged too fast in a fight and died. On definitely has been better though, and his confidence seems to have come back too. He's styling on people with weird shit like Anivia and Shen, he's been spamming a healthy array of ranged and melee supports, and he's had a number of super impressive highlights to go alongside of his worst moments. I think regardless of if On shits the bed or completely smurfs, I won't be too surprised, and we'll just have to see what happens. As you may have guessed already, while I think BLG is a very good team, I also think they're pretty flawed as well. First, let's go over their main strengths. The team has extremely strong early games for the most part, and they routinely will go up mass amounts of gold in the blink of an eye. If you're behind in gold against them, they won't take their foot off the gas at all, and they'll continue to try to pound you over and over again to expand their gold lead to insurmountable numbers. If you're even or slightly ahead, BLG will still approach you with full confidence and force you to outplay them, which is no easy feat considering everyone on the team has excellent mechanics. Bin, Knight, Shun, and Viper all have the ability to be the main focus of the team, and anyone can win the game for them at any point. This is pretty reflective in their drafting too. BLG almost always draft with clear goals in mind of which champion they want to play through, and then they're really good at forcing the game to be played around that lane. I can provide some examples of what I'm talking about to nail this point in. In Game 4 of Grand Finals, Bin was given Gwen, a strong carry, and he was into Zehen, another carry. This lane can go either way, but BLG are planning specifically to make sure Bin can be the focus. First of all, this matchup isn't obvious as to who should win. It's definitely possible for Gwen to fuck this early lane up, or for Zehen to outposture her and keep his health and CS even. Bin simply completely outplays the 1v1 and sets himself up for success before Shun even gets there. Speaking of which, Shun's entire early game pathing puts him in the direction of topside, which can be particularly scary when the enemy team is sporting a Kalista Renata, but Viper and On know they aren't the main carries, and Wukong isn't the type of champion pre-6 who can heavily influence a lane. Shun and Bin set up a really nice dive onto Xiaozhu with all of these conditions met, and with Zehen even panic flashing, this lane is completely over. This is BLG we're talking about though, and they love doubling down to push their advantage as far as possible, so Shun is going to revisit again at 5 minutes to give Gwen a second kill, at 7 minutes to pop his revive, and one more time at 9.5 minutes to capitalize on that passive being down. Bin ends up being a massive force in this game, ending 8-1-5, as Zehen was completely useless for almost all of it. The team also had a super similar game with a Knight Ziggs slaughtering all of NIP in Game 1 of playoffs, but I did a segment on a LoL Esports short for that and I'm too lazy to go over it again, so go check that out. I have 6 different shorts up on the LoL Esports socials by the way, go see those if you were unaware that they existed before. I'm pretty happy with how they turned out. As you can see, these strengths are almost a perfect mirror of peak BLG from a couple years ago, and it's why so many people believe they can do damage internationally this year. They do have a couple of major weaknesses though, and I need to address those as well. With all of this aggression coming out from all of the players, they're bound to make mistakes. Every single player on this team, except maybe Viper, because I can't remember off the top of my head if he did this or not, has had some really stupid deaths in games from over-posturing or playing too far up. Bin still seems to have turret incidents and solo kill incidents, On ints teamfights or gets caught out when putting down vision occasionally, Knight has been solo killed numerous times this split trying to squeeze out lane advantages that aren't there, and Shun has fell asleep at the wheel in mid-game dead zones sometimes. These tiny mistakes may not seem like much on a case-by-case basis, but they can really add up to some tangible advantages for opposing teams, and other top teams can and will punish BLG for this. BLG's tendency to never take the foot off the gas has also led to a few mid and late game throws, most notably against JDG in upper bracket finals. Remember how I said that series felt like a BLG stomp even though it went to 5 games? That's because BLG had a disgustingly large gold lead in all 5, including 6k leads, 8k leads, 10k leads, you name it. Then, BLG lost 2 of those games from some highly questionable gameplay, and the series extended way further than it had any business going. BLG's biggest strength can also be a massive weak point for them, and for my Western audience, the most accurate comparison I can give would be what Fnatic has been doing for the past half decade. Finally, because BLG play like this, there are other parts of the game they've neglected to perfect, mainly because they've never had to learn it to win. When BLG are up 10k, usually they can show up to an objective and walk in and win from wallet gap, or they can set a trap and make it impossible for the enemy team to contest. But when there isn't a big lead, or when BLG's position is compromised, they actually aren't that good of an objective team. Their setups aren't the cleanest, and they aren't always on the same page in long drawn-out sequences. Even though JDG went 3-6 against BLG in playoffs, I would say JDG have a way better grasp at how to approach objectives and vision lines, and it's a big reason as to why JDG have any wins against BLG at all. I think when BLG go up against cleaner macro teams with good enough mechanics to weather the early and mid-game storm, there's a good chance they will find much less success. Because of that, I think BLG are absolutely not favorites heading into this tournament, and should be expected to lose against Gen G. In my personal opinion, I would even probably predict FearX to win against BLG right now, and I'll have to see how BLG look at first stand before I can make the call for sure. I wouldn't be surprised at all if they end up struggling against the LCK, and we end up with a clear dynamic for which region is the strongest in the world this year. That's all I have for you for this one. 7 down, 1 to go. I have a Patreon for people who want to support me more while I'm making these videos. There are 3 tiers, each with varying amounts of benefits, including different types of behind the scenes content, and even a custom Poro drawing that I'll display in video outros. If that interests you, check out the Patreon link in the description. I'll see you all for the next one. Bye!